Back to the Blender course on 2.80, and this is video 9 that considers the use of materials. Whenever you have selected something that can be given a material that is not a lamp and not a camera, but a mesh, you will see that there's a new tab here called Material Properties. It has a material, but it has everything set at the very basic values. So it's just a dull gray, even if you turn on your shading. If you go to your viewport shading, or even if you go to your viewport shading in rendered mode, you will see that the object is gray. Now, sometimes it's fine just to give it some sort of a color. So let me add a plane here, scale it up 1,000 times so I have a nice floor. Click on the floor, call it floor, and now it has no material. So when you come here and you click on new, you get a new material, and you have two options here. You can either say use nodes, which gives you the principal BSDF node setup. I'll show you in a moment what that means. Or if it's very, very basic and you don't need anything else, you can just set some sort of a base color to it, like so. These settings here, if you want to have it a metallic in ray trace editing, you can actually turn it up, and then it gets this metallic reflection on it. Or if you want to make it specular, that works as well. But this only works when you go into cycles. So instead, we will be going back to EV because that's what we're doing now. And back to the materials tab. And if you take out the roughness, you will see how shiny the floor now is. If I grab the light, move it around, you can see how it has a nice reflection on the floor now. And all of this is handled merely by using this basic setting system here, which is fine for some really basic stuff. Again, if I wanted to go to the cube and I wanted to give it something, a nice base color, some kind of a greenish tint, you will see, by the way, that when you are in material preview, you only see the color, but you don't see shadows, you don't see anything. You have to go to the rendered view to see the shadows and the other stuff. But now I wanted to do something more with this cube, so I will go and I will say use nodes. And when I do this, my entire material management is now taken through a system called nodes. And nodes are here on your shading tab. Just make it a little closer, like so. On your shading, you have your object, just as you had it a moment ago. But here you have your nodes. Now, in a node system, you always have a material output node. Without this, you won't see any material. I'll just take it out and you'll see. The purple color means that Blender doesn't know what to do with this material because it doesn't have a material output node. So I will have to add a node, and as in Blender always, Shift A gives you all the nodes that you can need. You need a material output node, and you need to connect the surface to the shader here. Now, if you want to do a base color for it, it's fine. Just let's make it nice green. You can also make it specular, take down the roughness. And if I now go to my cycles engine and I move my light closer to the object, you will see that it reflects the light. You can see it there. This is actually easier to see if I make another object. I take out the light. Oops, I take out the light and I add a small sphere. And then I give this object a nice new type of material. instead of principled, I'll call it emission, give it some strength, and now the light on my scene comes from this ball. So this is how you can have a material on your object. Of course, this being a rendered preview in cycles, this is rather slow, but I'll show you how to do two materials in one object. So to do that, I'll go back to my EV because it's faster, and add a lamp because here you need a lamp. Move it up and give it some more power. Make it 100 watts. Why not make it 400 watts? Okay, that's nice. So if I want to have more than one material on a cube, it's fully possible. Instead of saying or having green, I can also add a new material, call it blue. And set the color, base color as blue. Something like that. And now if I go to my object and I pick two sides, two faces, and select blue and say assign, I now have a cube that has rotate Z, that has all the other ones are blue, green, except the two that I selected that are now blue. Okay, so your basic workflow is by first to create the object and then to create materials, then in edit mode assign the materials or textures, whatever, on the faces that you want to have. So this is how it looks. And all of these materials are governed by this system here. So if I make this a full specular and take down the roughness, and then here in the blue one I will say that it's not specular at all and it's fully rough. That means if I go to the cycles engine so you can see it, it means that the green one is reflective. It's rather hard to find where I want to place the ball actually. Somewhere there. Okay, now you can see how it is reflected of the green, but if I go on top of it, it is not reflected on the blue, because the blue has a different type of roughness. It's fully rough. It doesn't really give any reflection at all. But if I take that down, then the ball starts to show on top of my cube, like so. Okay. There is a lot of different shaders. This is just one shader. This has a collection of settings that you can have. So in that sense, it's very nice because you can set a lot of stuff from just one place, and it's rather easy. But sometimes you want to take it out and you want to add an output node material, and then you want to add a different type of shader. For example, you might want to have it as glass. That means your object is transparent. You can now take the ball, put it inside the cube, and it looks as if it is inside glass. It is indeed inside glass because it has the glass material, as you can see here. The IOR in glass, by the way, means the refraction index of the glass. Glass has a refraction index. Water has a different refraction index. So if you want to make a glass that has water inside it, then you have to have one IOR value for the glass and one IOR value for the water, so that it looks realistic and nice. Again, if I lose that shader and I add something like an emission, like you saw before, now it has a yellowish color, and it is actually so bright that you could turn it up to 2 or 20, and you can actually have it light the scene for you. You can take out the lamp and you can have the light in here. Or I'll just go back a couple of times. Or you can have a Shift A, shader, diffuse. And diffuse means that this time the object has no reflectivity whatsoever. It's just a color. And it won't reflect anywhere. Most of the time you will find that you want to have a combination of a couple of different shaders. So for example, you may have a diffuse shader, and then you may have a glossy shader. And these have to be connected through a mix shader. When you do this, your object, I'll take the same color from here. So this is, the hex value is here. I can copy that here. Now I have the same value here. Where's my glass sphere? It's here inside the thing. Okay. Now see closely what happens. When I have this here and my mix shader is turned at 50%, if I go all the way down, the material is fully diffuse. It doesn't reflect at all. But if I go full up, it becomes full glossy. So if I move the ball closer to the surface, we'll see what I mean. So you have a fully reflective ball surface here. This is unnatural, by the way. If you do reflective objects, don't go all the way to 100. Not even a mirror has 0 roughness. You always have to have some roughness to it. But the more you have roughness, the more diffuse the reflection of the ball is. Now there's very little reflection anymore. So if I go here and fully rough, and now I go here between the values here in the mix shader, you can see what happens here. There still is a reflection, but it goes further and further away until there is no reflection at all, because it's now fully diffuse. So that is the use of the mix shader. There's also a thing called add shader, which takes 2 shaders and adds them together. It's basically for doing overlays of color on other colors. So this is the basic way you add colors, and this is the basic use of the shading. But to do more with your objects and to get your meshes to look really nice, you will have to learn how to use UV mapping, which I will be doing next. I will be adding some textures, and I will be adding some texture coordinate nodes, and then I will show you how it works and how it all comes together. So that will be your basic usage of materials when your object is not very complex, especially when it's as simple as a cube. But when you need to have something that is slightly more complex, then you will have to have some other shading options and texture options, as well as object options in the materials. So to illustrate that, I'll make another cube, and in this cube I will extrude some parts of it so that it's not just a simple cube. First I'll turn on my screencast keys, and then I will take some faces like this one and extrude. Just a random extrusion to show you how it works, like so. Now this wouldn't work in materials very well if you wanted to use a texture. So if you wanted to have a color, of course it works, especially when you turn on your rendering options from there over there. But when you start wanting to use a texture on this, you will have slight issues, and I will illustrate that by using a checker texture. So to do that, I go to my shading, and in here I can see that I have just a base color. So I will add a texture node from the texture menu down here and call it image texture, sorry, checker texture, and turn on the colors so that one of them is white and the other one is a red. And as you can already see, they are not squares as you would expect in a checker texture, because the object is longer going that way than it is deep going that way. To fix this, first it's always a good idea to apply transformation, but in the texturing case it doesn't help. Instead, you want to have a texture mapping system for this. So you can go into input and texture coordinate and try to fix this by using generated. Sometimes it works, this time it doesn't work, but if you go to your object node and you pull the object node into the vector socket, it will fix the issue for you now, because it will then look at the object and figure out how it looks and how the texture should be applied. So now I have a nice even texture all over the place. This works, let's say 90% of the issues or things this works. Here you can see if I try to extrude it more, it doesn't scale that well. Oh, sorry, I actually moved it down a little. That's, yeah, I didn't extrude along the axis, I let it move, so I'll go back. And then I'll just grab it on the axis and it will wrap the texture nicely around the object. So if this works, nice, and if it doesn't work, then you have to do UV unwrapping. There is a separate piece on UV unwrapping later on, but even now we can take the object that we have in here and go into edit mode, select everything and hit the U key. Let me turn on the screencast keys for this window too. I don't know why it falls off all the time. So with everything selected, I say U and the Smart UV project, and the settings should be fine for all of this work. So just click on OK. And now if you go to UV editing, you can see that all of the faces of the object have now been split up and placed on a two-dimensional surface, which is your texture. And when you do your texturing, you can now pull out the UV instead of the texture. And this is again based on the actual object, but now we need to have a texture vector node to do some mapping. With the mapping node, we can scale the thing with like 10 by 10 by 10, or we can rotate the texture so that we get some really funky things. So you can apply any scale to any of the three axes, and you can also do rotation, which gives you this kind of a texture. If you enter 45, you get a nice even texture that looks like that. So that's how it works most of the time. you don't need to do the UV, but of course, if you want to do any detailed work, or if you want to do anything that is like really neat and complex, then of course you have to do UV unwrapping. I usually use the diffuse just because it's neater, and I don't need all the options that you have in the principal BSDF. So I just use, this is my basic setup, and I do any material from the UV texture coordinate through the mapping, through the texture, to the diffuse, and to the material output. Of course, the checker texture can be an image texture or whatever, so that's where you can place your textures.